Thank you so much for talking to me, Catherine.
No problem.
It's really nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Okay, so what I thought would be really interesting to talk about, I'm kind of in the midst of a bit of an obsession with the concept of genius and people, kind of what makes people really special and what happens when people do the stuff that comes out of what makes them special. So when your kind of inspiration and what makes you really unique goes out into the world. Because there's something really unique about the way that you come across, and
Thank you.
what I sense is there's been a really determined journey of not compromising and of listening to yourself really deeply.
Yeah.
And that really comes across in the work that you do and your photography and so on.
Thank you.
So I'd really like the opportunity to dig around a little bit and there's two kind of, in your world and your thinking, and there's two things that I'm really interested in asking you about. One is how you really, I suppose, excavate your genius when it comes to, not so much when it comes to just practicing your art for yourself, but when it comes to taking your art out into the world and making that something that has a context and has a life within someone else's life, I suppose. Kind of when it goes to crossing that threshold into doing your art for other people, whilst still holding the thread of your genius. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about maybe a bit later on is kind of where you've come against the barriers of fear that comes up in doing that, and how you've dealt with those things. But you don't have to now speak for 30 minutes on that topic. I'll kind of
Ready, go.
Yeah, so off you go. That was my idea, and that was kind of, that's what I was curious about. Really.
I love it, and I love that you said uncompromising. I think that's a really important word that I haven't even, I know that it's true for me, and yet that word hasn't actually come up for me. It's more like determined or like sassy. Like for some reason, uncompromising feels a little sassy because I just actually texted someone and told them that my sobriety comes before any friendship. And I think that is where I'm uncompromising. I feel like that's where it started, was when I was 19 and, I was 18 when I went to treatment, but I was 19 when I got out into the world and started to pave my way. And make decisions about how I wanted my life to look. And I realized pretty early on in my new chapter that it wasn't worth it to me to try to be the most popular and hang out with the people that did things that I no longer do. So that was the beginning of being uncompromising. And the way that I maintain sobriety changes all the time. I don't always go to AA at the same time, all of that. I haven't been to AA in a while, and yet my program or my practice is still very strong because I'm open to learning new ways of being in the world. So there's an uncompromise around being sober, and yet there's this willingness to try it in all different kinds of ways, if that makes sense. And I think that really, the artwork, I think, came sort of at the end of my drug use. When I was 18 and in high school, that's when I really started to draw and paint. And I saw my teacher, my high school art teacher, told me that I was talented and that I should stick with it. And so when I got sober, I decided to go to art school. And so everybody around me was, first time away from parents. And I was sober, and it was different. So, I told the people at the school that I was sober and that I was living on campus and there was no way I was going to share a room with anybody. So they gave me for 4 years, they gave me my own space. So it was great. I created whatever I needed to thrive. And that looked different from most of the kids in college. And so that's when I started doing self-portraiture and using myself as the model for digging up the feelings I was having that I was no longer leaving, I wasn't drinking them away or I wasn't using them away. I was actually feeling them and then exploring how that looks visually. What does it look like when I'm in a relationship with someone and I'm feeling vulnerable or afraid or whatever those feelings were, and then try to create an environment in my room, hanging things from the ceiling and creating, using objects that represented, symbols for other things within daily life, sort of like a surrealist would. And then put myself in those images. And that's really where it started. And I feel like that's just remained sort of how I am. And even though I've shifted and changed the way that I take my photos, there's still like underneath it all this place in me that knows that I get to express myself now in a new way because of the gift that I gave myself to be sober and start a new chapter and explore my world. And so whether I was a wedding photographer or teaching e-courses online or doing headshots for somebody, there's still that part of me that expresses in a unique way, just like you do. Like we could all have a camera, but I'm going to see that person standing in front of me in a slightly different way than you would. And so I honor that. And fear does come up because somebody's paying me money. And I think, well, I hope that their vision of what I see, people pay somebody money because they think that they will be able to capture them in the way that they want to be captured or, photographed. And the only way that that is afterwards. So, it's a bit of a gamble for that person paying to be like, I'm going to give you all this money to photograph my wedding because I saw other pictures you've done and I hope that you do the same thing. But I'm not a Sears portrait studio. I'm not like I'm in the moment. I'm paying attention to what's really happening. I'm not going to fabricate something so that it looks like another person's wedding. And so, it's just taking action. It's moving forward. It's just, saying yes. All of those things.
It's almost like you did the really, you did the dragon slaying that a lot of people do over their art. You did that over, before you got to, so almost like everything else is easy. Everything else is just kind of a gift. So where a lot of people they meet themselves and they have this kind of confrontation with the shadow side as they're doing their art and as they're pushing themselves to kind of step up with their art. It's almost like that had already happened. By the sounds of it, that's,
It did happen, and it happened, the first 10 years of being in this new space of not drinking or, all of that, I feel like I was in it for a long time because I was in my 20s. Angst. Yeah. So, I got sober at 18, so I was still things were very dramatic in relationships, So I did work that stuff out through my art, and it eventually just shifted, and now I'm dealing with a totally different chapter in my life, but underneath the surface is still the same human, where I'm still like, oh, I could be very dramatic about this event in my life, or I could take some pictures and look at it through another lens, and that's where I feel like photography really changed for me because I really got how it could shift my perception. By just looking through the camera and paying attention to how the light was falling on a frustrating situation. It then became shapes and objects and things that had no story. And I could separate myself a little bit from the story I'm telling myself. It doesn't always work, but I know that I have this tool here that I can use to look at a situation in a new way and hopefully shift away from whatever it's causing me to suffer. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's very rich, and I'm really starting to get an understanding of where your richness is coming from, because there's a real richness kind of running through your photographs and the way that you talk about them and the way that you design your programs and what you're kind of putting across in the personal development work that you do.
Thank you.
There's a real richness about it, and I'm starting to kind of really understand where that's coming from.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of us out there that are teaching similar e-courses, really. trying to get to the same place, but we're all coming from it from a personal story that no one else can share but us. Like, that's unique to me. And, I could name names of all of us, and I think you know who we all are. And I think that that's where the beauty of it is. I think that one person could take all of our classes and learn something just slightly different because of the point of view that we have.
Absolutely.
And I do think, like, my work is tame compared to what it was in college. And I'm now thinking in terms again about making my own work. And I have a series that I'm going to start working on, and it feels the same way that I used to feel when I was in college, and I'm ready to, like, dive back in and really look at some chapters of my life that need to be investigated. And I get really, I would say, like, curious is one of the words. Like, I feel like an archaeologist who's digging for clues. Like, I really am, like, investigating. I'm curious. I'm researching, and that's where I find my my artwork tends to be more meaningful for myself than just taking a snapshot of a tree.
Yeah,
for myself.
It's the process and the context and the meaning and the connection.
Yeah,
that's really in there. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
A lot of the people that will see this video and that I'm talking to at the moment are people who they have quite a rich practice, either as an artist or as a healer, because they're kind of interwoven, really.
Yeah.
And the point where they get to kind of noticing what I'm talking about is the point where they're going, okay, I'm really good at what I do within my kind of world of just doing it. And I'm really finding, I'm speaking as because I'm really finding a struggle when it comes to kind of understanding how on earth that could be of value to anyone else, or knowing how to kind of step out of that kind of deep, rich, creative world, absorbing creative world of channeling, essentially, which is what it is, to step out of that place, to kind of come up for air into the real world and talk to other mortals in a way that makes sense to them, so that they go, yes, beautiful. And I'm kind of fascinated by that process because, I like standing with a foot in two worlds. Quite interesting. And I'm really, I really love the way that you come across. It's very it's really coming from here, and yet it's easy to say, yes, that's really beautiful, I want that. It's really easy to say, I want that. And so you've obviously, you've done some work around it. And I'm really interested to hear kind of how you hang on to that thread from the underworld as you come up to the middle world, and what your awareness is of your process as you do that, because it may be completely unconscious, of course.
Yeah, that's such when you were talking, I actually got emotional and felt like crying. I think because it has been it's been a process. It hasn't been something where I'm like, I'm going to teach this now and I know exactly the words to use. Like, it really has evolved. And I think that the first thing for me to do was to give myself permission to try. And I think that the whole idea of being valuable touches me so deeply because that was the issue that I had before I started drinking and using. So I feel like that's my mission now, is to express, like, don't leave before the miracle happens. Like, don't check out before you get to the whatever gift it is that you're here for, whether it's to give to somebody else or for yourself. Like, we don't even know what it is, but if we check out, we won't know. And I feel like that's true when we're artists and we want to share it with the world, but then we have all this really deep insecurity about our value, and then we don't take action. I feel like that's another way of checking out, in a way, and not giving ourselves permission. We don't know who needs our message, and it might be a messy message in the beginning, but that messy message might be exactly what somebody needed. I hate to say it. I just feel like it doesn't have to be slick and, like, painted red and, with gloss, I really feel like my first e-course that I taught, I invited a lot of my friends that are online to join for free so that I could get a sense of whether it worked or not. But I put my heart and soul into it. It was like everything. And I read Danielle Laporte's Firestarter sessions, and it was like the catalyst for this class, and it didn't really work. And I felt so attached to it that I made myself sick around, like, if people signed up or didn't sign up, and if they were participating or not participating, and somehow that meant something. And so I learned a lot about what my people actually wanted, rather than me just putting something out there. It's a two-way street. It's not just me creating something and pushing through all my fear and putting it out there. There's also a conversation that needs to be happening with my people, about what it is that they're looking for and how they want it delivered and what is useful to them. Not that I want to make something just for them, because then I'm not being authentic, but just learning how to have a conversation with people rather than just me making my thing and putting it out there. Yeah. And so my Soulful E-course, I think I ran it a couple sessions, and I pulled it back in, reworked it, renamed it, took a lot of things out, changed the way that I deliver the content, and now it's like this rebirth has happened. But I wouldn't have known that had I not just put something out and tried. So I really think that's the key. It's not so much about having it right. I just feel like I'm creating and I'm paying attention. And when I took, the NAP series is really the catalyst for one of my classes, and then it became a it's seeping into everything now. And it's, a process of using the camera to take a picture of something that was happening in my life every single day that was frustrating, and then seeing how when I looked at through the camera, there was something sacred going on that I was missing because I was in my head. I didn't want to be there. I was checking out. I was leaving. I wasn't getting the miracle, And so I'm offering that to other people because I experienced it. What happens if you take a picture of the same thing over and over and over for 30 days? Sometimes nothing. You don't get it. And until afterwards, you can see like the 30 pictures all in a row, and you can investigate your life a little bit differently. And so for me, I had a certain experience, but that doesn't mean that when I put it out there, you're going to have the same experience, but it might touch you in a way that I wasn't even expecting. But you gave yourself permission to try. And through the 30 days, what I found is that people get bored, or they're like frustrated, like, I'm not getting it. I'm bored. I hate my subject. I want to change my mind about this. But then they give themselves permission to try to keep going. And that's where the miracle was happening, like just staying to see if maybe there's something they're missing. So I find that, as an artist, we have this experience and we want to share it with somebody, but we don't know that they're going to have the same experience. And so I feel like it's rich. It's like an invitation to a journey that I can't actually be in control of, really. I'm just here to like say, I had this experience. Let's see what happens if you try it too. And so it's interesting. I have 77 people right now in my deepening class, and they're all having totally different experiences, but they are having experiences that are changing and deepening the way that they view their life. And it's been interesting even to see how peer to peer they're learning from each other too. So all of it. It's all beautiful. So it's not just me teaching, it's the group. It becomes this other thing.
So when you do that thing of having that conversation, you put something out there and then you get the feedback. I think there's this fear that comes up about, well, if I have to start, especially for artists, that this fear of starting to create work for other people, and you're meant to do your art for yourself. And I mean, I think you always have to keep a thread of creation that is just off limits to any other human being. It's completely yours. I think that's really essential. And I still think there's a lot of room for co-creation. And I'm just curious, like, what your take is on how you kind of stay in line with yourself as you're having that conversation.
Well, there were two different chapters with my artwork. Well, a couple, but as a wedding photographer, it's kind of a different ball game. But I gave myself, like, I really wanted to be somebody who was hired because of my work and my eye rather than my price point. And I took pictures that I was proud of. And that's what mattered to me. how I felt. And I think that people resonated with that. And if they didn't like what they were seeing, or they didn't like my pricing, or they didn't like something, I wasn't attached to keeping them. I think that's the key, really, is like knowing and trusting that the universe is going to bring me the exact right people, and that if I say no to the ones that aren't exactly right for me, it's giving me space to have those people find me. If I'm saying yes and changing my pricing or changing how I do things because I'm afraid that nobody else will come and I'm afraid that no one else will hire me, I'm not doing myself a service or that person, because I'm going against myself creatively because of fear. And I am missing the people that could have come to me that just respect me for what I do. And I learned that with, I was working with Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the book, The Four Agreements. He was my spiritual teacher for about 5 years. And I worked at his office, and I helped him I didn't run them, but I helped him organize his power journey. So I was really like in it, 24/7 in the bubble, And I started my photography career right as I left working with him. And so I was still in that, I still really had very strong beliefs around, this is a dream, and we're all dreaming a different dream. And so I get to create this however I want to. And if I state something to the universe and don't waver, then I'm going to, people are going to come to me that don't fit. And it's not that the universe is saying, oh, we don't believe you. It's just another opportunity to state to the universe, you know what? Thank you, but no. That's not actually it. I'm really serious.
It's almost like the universe going, you really want this? Just check in. You want it?
Totally. Yeah. I had that very strongly with the wedding work, where there was fear around making it and being seen as the photographer that I wanted to be seen as, and doing the work that felt good to me, because I'm a fine art photographer. So I had like ego to get rid of, out of the way, so that I could be a wedding photographer. And once I allowed myself to do it and just have fun with it, it was a game. And I think you were saying too, like, people get afraid that if people are hiring or they're putting themselves out there to be hired, that there's a fear about not being authentic and sort of losing yourself. And I think it's really about checking in with how you feel, and just constantly asking yourself if you're going against yourself, you'll know it, you'll feel it, and then you can change your mind. I think that's one thing that I've been doing my whole life, is giving myself permission to change my mind, but I think that if you don't try, then you'll never know. And I really am an advocate for just trying. You might be surprised at, like, even if you're doing something a little bit more commercial than you originally thought you would, shifting your belief system around that so that you're actually creating money so that you can fund your artwork in a way that doesn't go against you. It's just a different way of expressing. It can work. But if it really does feel like it's sucking your soul dry, then it's a cue. Yeah. Yeah, but I do think that trying and seeing how it feels, like giving yourself a month. And I'm the kind of person that quits. Like, if it doesn't feel good, I'm out.
Right, yeah.
So I did wedding photography for 5 years, and then I was out because it stopped feeling good.
I just continue to be fascinated by the profound power of saying no.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just incredible.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's powerful. And I'm actually going through it again, where I was talking to a friend of mine who's also in the online world about, do I actually like what I'm doing in my daily life? Is this actually the life that I want? Now that I have classes up and I'm running them, like the dream has actualized, do I actually like it? And so I'm really assessing what I want my life to look like and how to make it so. And so I think that's...
process that, isn't it?
I think really it's great.
And it makes you look at the things that you sort of take for granted as part of the wallpaper and start to go, ooh,
yeah.
Do I actually want it to be that way?
Yeah.
It's surreal and interesting. It depends how much you unpack it, of course.
Yeah.
That daily life thing is, yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
You said so many useful things. It's brilliant. Lovely. And you said it, like that thing about just changing your mind. I mean, that's just such a simple thing, isn't it? But like
Yeah.
those rules that we lay out for ourselves, like I can't do this and I can't do that. And one last question I have for you is just about this process of kind of, I suppose really to sum it up as going commercial, really.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think that it's not for them, or they're not that kind of person, or they're not that kind of artist, or, you know, their brain doesn't work like that, or, you know, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I just wonder if you have any opinions about that, really, or what your take is on it. Because I think, you know, you've said some really amazing, inspiring stuff, and yet it's the kind of thing where some folks might listen to it and go, that's great, but that's her, because she's her.
Yeah.
She's over there being her, and I'm over here being me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like that's resistance too. I mean, I feel like I can use an example of AA, even though, you know, when I was newly sober, there's so many ideas and beliefs that I had about how to be in the world that I really believed in strongly. And what they say is go to 6 different meetings until you find it and be open. And I feel like that's the same in life. Like if we are so like strict about the box that we're in and the beliefs that we have, but we're suffering as a result of those beliefs, I think it's time to take a look at that. If we're not suffering, keep going.
Yeah,
but if there is some place that we are suffering as a result, like we're not making the money because we're like, I will only make my work this way and I won't, you know, I feel like you either need to learn how to be in business with the work that you are doing and invest in that, or you need to shift what you're willing to do in order to earn a living. And I said it before, like I went to fine art school, so I had my nose in the air for a long time about what was okay and what wasn't. And I made my artwork not to sell it. I made my artwork because I'm an artist.
Absolutely.
And I have a ton of artwork in my basement wrapped in bubble wrap that nobody's purchased. Like I've shown it in galleries and done that whole thing. And it just wasn't really the lifestyle I liked. I don't like going to openings very much. I feel it's very awkward. And I noticed that I needed to try something else. And I worked in theater while I was doing my own artwork. Like I tried a lot of different things in the art field, just in totally different ways. I was an assistant stage manager at some of the big theater companies here. And it was fascinating to be able to see how a lot of people make one piece of artwork rather than me making my art by myself. But it still wasn't who I was. I had to leave that too. So investigating, I think, is number one, and being curious. I think both of those things, just being curious, but also there was something else I needed to share about that because it's such a hot topic because I'm a rebel. I can't work for somebody else. I really I don't know if I'm hireable, really. I don't have skills like that. I've tried. And I put on the suit and had those jobs part-time so that I could make my artwork, and it was terrible.
Can't do as I'm told.
I can't. I won't do as I'm. There's a Pee Wee Herman movie where he's always saying or he doesn't always say it, but there's a line from Pee Wee Herman that he's like, "I'm a rebel, Dottie. I'm a loner, a rebel," or something like that. I'm like, that is me. Yeah. And so knowing that about myself, I really did need to become a business owner and do what it took to be the boss. And I have to say that being the boss doesn't mean that I always want to do what is on the list, because I'm still a rebel. I don't want to do homework. I don't want it to feel like homework. I don't want it, So there's still an inner 13-year-old having a little tantrum. I don't know that goes away. But feeling, I feel so much more aligned with who I am today because of, trying all these other things and recognizing that they don't work and figuring out what does for me. And if it's not bringing in enough money, what do I need to do? What is the solution here? How do I need to, what am I not taking care of? Because money is always available, and I'm bringing up money. You're not even bringing it up, but I feel like they're tied. Like when you're talking about going out into the commercial world, there is that, need for money, or all of us would be sitting in our studios all day.
Yeah. Or even in the woods, maybe not even on studio.
Yeah, the studio could be the woods for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I just think that shifting your attention if you're suffering is an important skill.
Yeah, and I think shifting attention is quite, when you were talking about that, like the kind of being able to step back and say what's working, what isn't working. I mean, that might be accused of being analytical, which might be accused of being something that we don't do as artists and creatives. And I think that just kind of flashed into my mind. That there needs to be that evaluative space, I suppose, of kind of going, well, is this working? How could it work? How could it work differently?
Yeah.
That was just something that came up from what you were saying, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually gotten myself, I've been complaining about not being a girl who has a lifestyle where I'm active, and I really want to be a girl who like gets up early and works out every day. And I used my situation at home as my excuse for the last 4 years. Like, I can't get up because I'm a mom and whatever. And now I've found out how to ask for help in that area of my life. And I feel like asking for more than you think you deserve, or asking for help, or doing interviews with people that you are inspired by, like figuring out how they do it and figuring out how to shift so that you're stopping the martyr conversation or the victim conversation and really owning and taking responsibility for what's not working and then taking action has really been helpful to me, because now I'm getting up at 5 and working out and I feel like $1,000,000.
Would you please write a blog post about how you made that happen?
Yeah, I should. And now I'm going to sleep when my son goes to sleep, which means from 8 until 3 in the morning is when I used to work on my work. I don't have that anymore. And so now I'm figuring out how I can have 2 days a week where I am not responsible for anything but making my artwork. And it's different than when I was single and didn't have kids, because I could just make art whenever I wanted, Yeah. But then to have this like time frame, I actually am feeling a lot of happiness in my being around having this unscheduled time during the day, and I can still sleep at night and I can get up early, and like, what is it going to take for me to really actualize my dream? And my dream changes all the time, so this is the new one, Yeah. So it's interesting.
Well, that's like the cherry on the cake for me, this conversation, because getting up at 5 in the morning is what I really, really want to do. And yeah, right. I don't know if you see the bags under my eyes, probably not.
I haven't.
Yeah, we had such a bad night with my little boy last night. I don't know what's going on with it, but anyway.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to shift that and change that to step into a different space is, yeah, that's lovely. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the last thing that I wanted to ask you about is the Soulful Summit is coming up.
Yay, it's coming.
It's going so rich, so lovely. So I wanted what I want to ask you was if you feel that you can do this, who are you most looking forward to? Like, what are your most like delightful moments in the summit going to be, do you think?
I would rather say that I'm doing 35 interviews this year. Last year was 24. So
that's a huge number.
I am interviewing Miguel Ruiz next week. And so I'm just looking forward to connecting with him again, really. But all of them, I have to say that when you think you know something about someone, guess again. Because all of my interviews, I'm getting goosebumps now. Like I feel like the summit, all the interviews, that when I'm in the moment and just paying attention to what they're saying, and that cues me to the next question I would ask, rather than having a list of things I want to ask.
Yes.
It really brings me to a connection that I didn't know I was going to have with that person, in a way that I didn't know I was going to have with that person, and I know that it's going to translate to other people, not just that we have a connection, but what they're saying is so rich, and not exactly what you would think that they would be talking about. And I think that's what is so unique about having a conversation with somebody that's not just like, what do you do? Why do you do it? It's a little bit like underneath the surface, like you're talking to me today. It's about the real stuff that happens around fear and owning your greatness and knowing that you're valuable. It just brings out really interesting tools and valuable tips and interesting stories that I didn't know about. And so I would say in every way, all of them have been really life affirming and changing for me. So I'm hoping that it, in the same way that when you make a piece of artwork, you have no idea how it's going to be received. It's a little like, what I got out of an interview, you probably would have a totally different experience, and that's the beauty of it,
Yeah, Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Catherine.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed it.
I'm glad we got to do this.
Yes, so am I.
Yay!